Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4. The Yoga of Wisdom. Summary of the fourth discourse. Lord Krishna declares that he is born from age to age in order to raise man and take him to the Supreme. Whenever there is a prevalence of unrighteousness and the world is ruled by the forces of darkness, the Lord manifests himself to destroy these adverse forces and to establish peace, order, and harmony. Hence, we see the appearance of the great saviors of the Lord. What is the secret of yogic action? This the Lord proceeds to explain to Arjuna. Even though one is not engaged in action, but if the mind is active with the idea of doership and egoism, then it is action in inaction. On the other hand, though engaged physically in intense action, if the idea of agency is absent, if one feels that Prakriti does everything, it is inaction in action. The liberated man is free from attachment and is always calm and serene, though engaged in ceaseless action. He is unaffected by the pairs of opposites like joy and grief, success and failure. One who has true union with the Lord is not subject to rebirth. He attains immortality. Such a union can only be achieved when one is free from attachment, free from anger, being thoroughly purified by the right knowledge. The Lord accepts the devotion of all, whatever path they may use to approach him. Various kinds of sacrifices are performed by those engaged in the path to God. Through the practice of these sacrifices, the mind is purified and led Godward. Here also there must be the spirit of non-attachment to the fruits of actions. Divine wisdom, according to Sri Krishna, should be sought at the feet of a liberated Guru, one who has realized the truth. The aspirant should approach such a sage in a spirit of humility and devotion. God himself manifests in the heart of the Guru and instructs the disciple. Having understood the truth from the Guru by direct intuitive experience, the aspirant is no longer deluded by ignorance. The liberated aspirant directly beholds the self in all beings and all beings in the self. He cognizes through internal experience or intuition that all beings, from the Creator down to a blade of grass, exist in his own self and also in God. Arjuna is given the most heartening assurance that divine wisdom liberates even the most sinful. When knowledge of the self dawns, all actions with their results are burnt by the fire of that knowledge, just as fuel is burnt by fire. When there is no idea of egoism, when there is no desire for the fruits of one's actions, actions are no actions. They lose their potency. In order to attain divine wisdom, one must have supreme faith and devotion. Faith is therefore the most important qualification for a spiritual aspirant. The doubting mind is always led astray from the right path. Faith ultimately confers divine knowledge, which removes ignorance once and for all. Mere intellectual knowledge does not lead to liberation. It cannot grant one supreme peace and freedom. When one has achieved complete self-mastery and self-control, when one has intense faith and devotion, then true knowledge dawns within and one attains liberation and freedom from all weaknesses and sins. The Lord concludes by emphasizing that the soul that doubts goes to destruction. Without faith in oneself and in the scriptures and in the words of the preceptor, one cannot make any headway on the spiritual path. It is doubt that prevents one from engaging in spiritual sadhana and realizing the highest knowledge and bliss. By following the instructions of the Guru and through sincere service, one's doubts are rendered asunder and divine knowledge manifests itself within. Spiritual progress then goes on at a rapid pace. Verse 1, the Blessed Lord said, I taught this imperishable yoga to Vibhishan. He told it to Manu. Manu proclaimed it to Ishvaku. This handed down thus in regular succession, the royal sages knew. This yoga, by a long lapse of time, has been lost here, O Paruntap, the burner of foes. That same ancient yoga has been taught today to thee by me, for thou art my devotee and friend. It is the supreme secret, Arjun says in verse 4. Later on was thy birth, and prior to it was the birth of Vivashvan the sun. How am I to understand that thou didst teach this yoga in the beginning? The Blessed Lord said, Many births of mine have passed, as well as of yours, O Arjun. I know them all, but thou knowest not, O Paruntap. Though I am unborn and of imperishable nature, and though I am the Lord of all beings, yet ruling over my own nature, I am born by my own Maya. Whenever there is a decline of righteousness, O Arjun, and rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. For the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of righteousness, I am born in every age. He who thus knows in true light my divine birth and action, after having abandoned the body, is not born again. He comes to me, O Arjun, freed from attachment, fear and anger, absorbed in me, taking refuge in me, purified by the fire of knowledge. Many have attained to my being. In whatever way men approach me, even so do I reward them. My path do men tread in all ways, O Arjun. Those who long for success in action in this world sacrifice to the gods, because success is quickly attained by men through action. The fourfold caste has been created by me according to the differentiation of guna and karma, though I am the author thereof. Know me as a non-doer and immutable. In a Brahman, sattva predominates. He possesses serenity, purity, self-restraint, straightforwardness and devotion. In a Kshatriya, Rajas predominates. He possesses prowess, splendor, firmness, dexterity, generosity and rulership. In a Vaisya, Rajas predominates and Tamas is subordinate to Rajas. He does the duty of ploughing, protection of cattle and trade. In a Sudra, Tamas predominates and Rajas is subordinate to the quality of Tamas. He renders service to the other three castes. Human temperaments and tendencies vary according to the gunas. Actions do not taint me, nor have I a desire for the fruits of actions. He who knows me thus is not bound by actions. Having known this, the ancient seekers after freedom also performed actions. Therefore, do thou perform actions as did the ancient of days of yore. What is action? What is inaction? As to this, even the wise are confused. Therefore, I shall teach thee such action, the nature of action and inaction, by knowing which thou shalt be liberated from the evil of samskar, the world of birth and death. For verily the true nature of action, which is enjoyed by the scriptures, should be known. Also that of forbidden or the unlawful action and of the inaction, hard to understand is the nature or the path of action. He who sees inaction in action and action in inaction, he is wise among the men. He is a yogi and performer of all actions. He whose understandings are all devoid of desires and selfish purposes, and whose actions have been burnt by the fire of knowledge, him the wise call a sage. Having abandoned attachment to the fruit of the action, even content, depending on nothing, he does not do anything, though engaged in activity. Without hope, and with the mind and the self controlled, having abandoned all greed, doing mere bodily action, he incurs no sin. Content with what comes to him without effort, free from the pairs of opposites and envy, even minded in success and failure, though acting, he is not bound. To one who is devoid of attachment, who is liberated, whose mind is established in knowledge, who works for the sake of sacrifice, for the sake of God, the whole action is dissolved. Brahma is the oblation. Brahma is the melted butter, the ghee. By Brahma is the oblation poured into the fire of Brahma. Brahma verily shall be reached by him who always sees Brahma in action. Some yogis perform sacrifice to the gods alone, while others who have realized the self offer the self as sacrifice by the self in the fire of Brahma alone. Some again offer hearing and other senses as sacrifice in the fire of restraint. Others offer sound and various objects of the senses as sacrifice in the fire of the senses. Others again sacrifice all the functions of the senses and those of the breath, the vital energy of pran, in the fire of the yoga of self-restraint kindled by knowledge. Some again offer wealth, austerity, and yoga as sacrifice, while the ascetics of self-restraint and rigid vows offer study of scriptures and knowledge as sacrifice. Others offer as sacrifice the outgoing breath in the incoming and the incoming in the outgoing, restraining the courses of the outgoing and the incoming breaths, solely absorbed in the restraint of the breath. Others, who regulate their diet, offer life breaths in life breaths. All these are knowers of sacrifice, whose sins are all destroyed by sacrifice. Those who eat the remnants of the sacrifice, which are like nectar, go to the eternal Brahma. The world is not for the man who does not perform sacrifice. How then can he have the other, O Arjun? Thus, various kinds of sacrifices are spread out before Brahma, literally at the mouth or face of Brahma. Know them all as born of action, and knowing thus, thou shalt be liberated. Superior is wisdom sacrificed to sacrifice with objects, O Parantap. All actions in their entirety, O Arjun, culminate in knowledge. Know that by long prostration, by questions and by service, the wise who have realized the truth will instruct thee in that knowledge. Knowing that, thou shalt not, O Arjun, again become deluded like this, and by that thou shalt see all beings in thyself and also in me. Even if thou art the most sinful of all sinners, yet thou shalt verily cross all sins by the raft of knowledge. As the blazing fire reduces fuel to ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge reduce all actions to ashes. Verily, there is no purifier in this world like knowledge. He who is perfected in yoga finds it in the self in time. The man who is full of faith, who is devoted to it, and who has subdued all the senses, obtains this knowledge, and having obtained the knowledge, he goes at once to the supreme peace. The ignorant or faithless, the doubting self proceeds to destruction. There is neither this world nor the other, nor happiness for the doubting. He who has renounced actions by yoga, whose doubts are rendered asunder by knowledge, and who is self-possessed, actions do not bind him, O Arjun. And the final verse of this chapter, verse 42, Arjun says, therefore, with the sword of knowledge of the self, cut asunder the doubt of the self born of ignorance, residing in thy heart, and take refuge in yoga. Arise, O Arjun. Thus, in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagavad Gita, the science of the eternal, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjun, ends the fourth discourse entitled The Yoga of Wisdom. Hari Om Tat Sat.